It all started on a quiet Tuesday morning, the kind where you expect nothing but routine. I was making coffee, planning my day, when the police knocked on my door. At first, I thought they had the wrong address. There was no reason for them to be there. But when they said my name, my stomach dropped. They told me I was under arrest for domestic violence against my wife, Melissa. I couldn't process the words. I had never laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice in a way that could be taken as threatening. But before I could ask more questions, they had me in handcuffs, in front of my neighbors, like I was some kind of monster. The ride to the station felt like a blur. My mind kept replaying the morning. Melissa wasn't even home when they came. She had apparently gone to the police earlier that day, crying and showing bruises on her arm, saying I'd attacked her the night before. I knew those bruises weren't from me, and deep down, I suspected she'd done them to herself. But how could I prove that? Once an accusation like that is made, it's almost impossible to convince people otherwise. They booked me, fingerprinted me, and threw me in a holding cell. I kept thinking about my two kids. What were they being told? Was Melissa poisoning their minds against me right now? I didn't get to talk to them, and that was the hardest part. I could take the humiliation, the discomfort, the cold steel bench, but the thought of my kids believing I was dangerous nearly broke me. When I finally got a lawyer and heard the full details, it was worse than I imagined. Melissa had told police we'd been arguing over money and that I'd snapped, grabbed her, and thrown her into a wall. She described every detail with such conviction, it made me wonder how long she'd been planning this. The bruises were apparently fresh, but that only proved my point. Because the night she claimed it happened, I was on a late shift at work, logged in the system from 6 p.m. until midnight. Still, they didn't drop the charges right away. They said they needed to investigate. So I sat in jail for weeks while Melissa lived in our house, probably using my absence to get sympathy and play the victim. My family tried to help, but the whole situation was delicate. People hear domestic violence and immediately assume the worst. Even some of my closest friends went silent, like they didn't know what to believe. I lay on that hard jail bed every night thinking, why would she do this to me? And deep down, I started to realize it was about control. It was about money. It was about making sure she came out on top no matter what happened. I promised myself that if I ever got out, if the truth ever came to light, I wouldn't just walk away quietly. I was going to make sure she regretted every lie she told. Because she hadn't just tried to ruin my marriage, she'd tried to ruin my life. When I got out on bail, my life was already in pieces. My job had suspended me. My friends barely spoke to me, and the whispers in our small town felt like knives in my back. I was living at my brother's house because I couldn't even go back home. My wife had a restraining order against me, and she was in our house with the kids. Every time I thought about how easily she had spun that story, I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I had loved this woman. I had worked my hands raw to provide for her and our children, and she had looked me in the eye and painted me as a monster to the world. My lawyer told me we were facing an uphill battle. It's one thing to say you're innocent, it's another to prove it when the court of public opinion already believes you're guilty. But I wasn't going to let her destroy me without a fight. The first real break came when my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, decided to speak up. She was an older woman who lived next door, and she told my lawyer that she'd been outside the night of the supposed incident. She heard no shouting, no fighting, nothing. In fact, she'd seen my wife carrying boxes to her car and laughing on the phone with someone just an hour before she called the cops on me. My lawyer immediately subpoenaed her as a witness. Then we found out something even bigger. My wife had been seeing another man for months. Text messages surfaced where she talked about getting rid of me so she could finally be free. It was all the evidence we needed to show motive. Court hearings were grueling. Sitting there while she cried crocodile tears and spun lies in front of the judge made my blood boil. She described injuries she never had, fights that never happened, and tried to make me out as some violent man. But when my lawyer presented the neighbor's testimony and the text messages, the tone in the courtroom shifted. The prosecutor's case started crumbling. You could see it in their faces. They knew they'd been fed a false story. It still took months before the judge finally dismissed the charges. But when he did, I felt like I could finally breathe for the first time in almost a year. I walked out of that courtroom a free man, but freedom didn't mean peace, not yet. She had taken my reputation, my home, my time with my kids. I wasn't going to just let her walk away from what she had done. That's when I decided I was going to take this further. I filed a lawsuit for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and even sought full custody of our children. My lawyer told me it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for another fight. I had already been through the fire. There was nothing she could do to break me now. And if she thought the nightmare was over, she was about to find out it was just beginning. The day I walked out of that courthouse a free man was the day I swore to myself that my wife, Melissa, would never get away with what she did to me. I had spent 8 months behind bars for something I didn't do, living with the shame of being called a wife beater, enduring stares and whispers from people I once called friends. Even after being found not guilty, the damage to my name, my business, and my relationship with my kids was massive. But I wasn't going to crawl into a hole and let her keep the upper hand. No, I was going to fight back. The first thing I did was hire the meanest, most ruthless attorney I could afford. I didn't care about the cost. I had been humiliated, destroyed, and treated like trash. My lawyer and I went through every single message, email, and recorded conversation I had with Melissa. We dug deep into the day of the so-called incident. And guess what? We found camera footage from a neighbor's security camera that showed her walking out of our house with a bag before the police even arrived, smiling on the phone, perfectly fine. That evidence alone became my sword. We filed a defamation and malicious prosecution lawsuit against her. And while the case was moving forward, I went for custody of our kids. Melissa thought she had me beaten, but her arrogance became her undoing. In court, my lawyer played those videos, showed the text messages where she bragged to her friend about getting rid of me, and even exposed how she coached our kids to say I hurt her. Watching her face when the judge read those messages out loud was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. The judge didn't just grant me joint custody, he granted me full custody. Melissa was deemed an unfit parent, at least for the time being. She broke down in tears right there in court, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. She had stolen 8 months of my life, and now I had my kids back. But I wasn't done. My lawsuit dragged on for months, and every hearing revealed more lies she had told. When it was finally over, the jury awarded me a six-figure settlement. Money can't buy back lost time, but that check felt like a stamp of justice. I used part of it to rebuild my business and another part to set up savings accounts for my children. The best part? The truth about what she did went public. Local news picked up the story, and suddenly people saw me for who I really was. A man, falsely accused, who fought back and won. Melissa became a pariah in our community. Friends who once sided with her now avoided her like the plague. I had been broken, humiliated, and thrown into a cell, but I came out sharper, stronger, and determined. She wanted to destroy my life, but in the end, she destroyed her own. And as I watch my kids grow up happy and safe in my care, I know one thing for sure. Sometimes revenge is just living well while your enemies drown in the mess they made.